Hello and welcome back to the Myles Ruttencutter podcast. Today I have Mr. Dean Black. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dean Black. I'm a member of the Florida House of Representatives, District 15, and I'm also the Republican Party of Florida State Committee man for Duval County, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you for coming on and giving me some of your time. Let's get started. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. This nation was built on truth, and truth still matters. Welcome to the Myles Ruttencutter podcast. Here, faith guides politics, and conviction leads to conversation. I'm Myles, and here we stand firm, speak boldly, and seek what's right, no matter the cost. Let's get started. To start off, I would like to ask about your roots as an 8th generation Floridian.
So, my family came to Florida in 1803 to run cattle. And interestingly, we still run cattle today. I have a cattle ranch. My wife and I have raised 5 children. We have 6 grandchildren, and we raise cattle. I have other relatives that are still in that business, and I'm a businessman also. I've owned a number of different businesses over the years, and of course, I have more than a passing interest in politics. And in our family, within our collective family memory, we've seen a lot of changes in Florida. And I think that long perception actually helps in the state legislature and in party politics.
Awesome. I have 5 siblings also, and I think that's awesome, showing this is where you're coming from, this is the people you're representing, and I'm glad that you have the passion for politics. And with that passion, I'd like to ask, why did you first decide to go into politics? What was that moment?
I was always interested in politics. I was a political science major in college. I was on the debate team in high school and in college, and I got very interested in politics at an early age, but I wasn't actually involved in politics except in voting. I was in the military, come from a military family. I served. I have 2 sons who serve today, and most of the men in our family, going back many, many generations, they all served. And so service above self was a value in our family, and it always had been. And in 2009, we had the Great Recession that had happened, and I was watching what was going on in politics and became concerned. And I had worked in radio for a number of years and gotten out of it and decided, oh my gosh, I've got to get back in. Somebody give me a microphone. I've got to scream bloody murder. So I got back into radio and was a conservative talk radio host. And one thing led to another. That resulted in me running for Congress in 2010 in a bitter 9-way Republican primary. And by the will of the people, I came in second. And that got me involved, though, in party politics and led to me becoming a member, ultimately, of the Florida legislature and doing all the things that I do now.
Awesome. That's great, seeing how you went from just the whole pattern of everything that led up to it. And I think that's definitely a common path that a lot of people take, especially going through the radio. I think that's becoming more common for people getting into politics.
I think so. Politics has changed over the years, and I always say this. I want to go back to when politics was boring. I want to make politics boring again. I want us to argue about more taxes or less taxes, more government, less government.
Yeah.
Like we used to. But instead, we're arguing about things I never thought we would have to argue about. We're arguing about what is a woman and what parts is it okay to cut off of a child in the name of health care. We're arguing about whether or not we should even have a southern border at all. And I could just go on and on and on, but politics has become so polarized. It's not healthy, But we are polarized for some very good reasons. There are things that we disagree about viscerally that we ought to disagree about. And we should resolve these things politically through our political processes. And I want to get those things resolved and make politics boring again.
Make politics boring again. When you make those hats, you got to let me get one of them.
We should.
Yeah.
We should do that.
Who in Florida legislative history, past or present, models the kind of representative you strive to be?
Going back in history, I have family members who served in the legislature, but I can't tell you what their policies were. And, we're at a turning point in our history. I have to say, in Florida, the most consequential governor in America right now, and in certainly living memory and maybe ever, has been Governor Ron DeSantis. Mm-hmm. And here's why I say that. We had become polarized in this country for powerful reasons, and it seemed like the left was on the march. They were doing all sorts of things. And a lot of Republicans had gotten demoralized. We're like, oh my gosh, they're doing all of these things, and what in the world can we do? And Governor Ron DeSantis won, and he set about pushing back. And one statute at a time, item after item after item. They were indoctrinating our children in our schools. Well, we started pushing back, and we started getting DEI out of our K through 12 education. We started getting it out of state government and the university system. We started pushing back on all sorts of things. We banned transgender surgery on little children. And we pushed back on teachers' unions. We did all sorts of things, and something happened. All of a sudden, the whole nation, the eyes of America were on Florida. And imperceptibly, what we now call the Free State of Florida was born. And that has become a model for the nation, and it has become the hope of America. And I can't think of any other leader that I could point to that would be able to say that, because we have completely turned the tables on this great political battle, this ideological struggle that we've been involved in. We've turned the table, and it is still a game where it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back sometimes, and we don't like that 1 step back, but I'd rather be us than them right now, and that's why.
That's awesome. So taking from that, I assume Ron DeSantis is the person that you look up to most for your leadership.
Yes, and there are other fantastic leaders
totally.
as well. It is a team effort. There have been many, many great leaders, but I think Governor DeSantis was the man at the moment.
100%. I'm glad to hear that's your particular person of choice to look up to, because he's done great for our state. And with you, what do you think your number one achievement is? We'll do top 3. We'll do top 3 if it's too much.
Yeah, because we run bills and we pour our heart and soul into these things, and this is like asking me which one of my children do I love the most. I don't know.
That's the next question.
And actually, I'm not sure that I should even be the one to judge it. I think it's for the people to decide. And so, not in any particular order. Well, most recently, I passed a bill to ban DEI in local government. I ran that with my Senate counterpart, Clay Yarborough. And I did that because we had made so much progress in eradicating this poisonous ideology known as DEI from local government or from state government, from our K through 12 education, from the university system, from state government. But the one place that we had left alone, and we hadn't figured out how to do it yet, was with county and municipal governments in Florida. And there was a lot being done there. The cities sit atop 80% of our population. And we could operate and eradicate DEI all around the periphery, but as long as you let them sit astride the major population centers, they would always be able to come back and reinstitute and propagate this ideology. So it took 2 years trying to get the language right, because we could ban DEI czars and they would just call it something else. They'd call them a data analyst. And we decided that what we would do is focus on the behavior. Anyway, it was a heck of a fight, but we got that bill passed and we banned DEI in local government. So that's one bill. Another bill was the Paycheck Protection Act. And I passed that as a freshman, actually. And it required that public sector unions, think teachers unions, for example, get at least 60% of their employees to join the union or face the prospect of recertification, and they could have to stand for elections. Also, we stopped automatic payroll deduction of union dues. You were going to have to go to them and ask them for a check. And you were also required by that law to do financial accounting. They were going to have to audit their books and be transparent with their members and show them how you were spending their money. And what was often happening is they were collecting dues, they were sending the money up to national union operations, then it would find its way into some radical left-wing political committee and wind up back in your community electing radical left-wing people to school boards. And you would have really conservative areas with these really liberal school boards, and you would wonder how that happened. That's how that was happening. So now we forced them to go to the teachers. If you want their money, show them how you spent their money. Show them what they got for that. Show them what you did. And what we learned in the course of those audits, they discovered that in Duval County, the president of the Duval County Teachers Union was stealing. And so was the executive director. And they were found to have stolen millions of dollars of teachers' money. So the union said they were advocating for teachers, trying to get them pay, but all in all, the whole time they were stealing their money. Each one of them stole more than $1.3 million of teachers' money, and they now sit in federal prison because of it. And that was a very consequential piece of legislation, and it was highly ironic that it would end up taking down the leadership of the union in my own home county.
Yeah.
Third bill, I passed a bill to require minimum training standards for direct caregivers for people caring for people with Alzheimer's disease or related forms of dementia. That's a personal issue to me. I lost my father to Alzheimer's disease. And we passed a law. It required minimum training standards for anyone caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. But it also created within the Department of Elder Affairs a portal, a website where you could go in and do that training for free, but not just for caregivers. We made it open to every Floridian.
That's awesome.
So if you're taking care of your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa and you're trying to take care of them at home and you'd like to know best practices and you'd like to get help, because it's a tragic thing and it goes on and on and on and it wears people out, and you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. There are things that we know that you should be warned about and that you can be taught, and there are resources you should know about. And so we made that available for free to every Florida citizen. And I'm proud of that because, well, one, I'm honoring my dad. But my dad taught me we should respect our elders. And the Bible says, honor thy father and thy mother. That's a commandment. And to me, that's part of that. And I do believe that Florida citizens want to respect their elders. They want to honor their father and their mother. They want to do the right thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Look, I fight partisan battles as hard as anybody. But I also believe that I want our people to be able to join together and function as a society. And to do that, we need to find things that we can agree on and operate together for the common good. And we should all be able to agree that respecting our elders and taking care of them is the right thing to do.
I think that's awesome. I think all three of those bills were very influential in Florida, and I'm very glad that you led the initiative to have those things happen.
Well, thank you. I'm going to get calls because there were some other really great bills we ran, and people are going to say, why didn't you say that
one? Well, I co-sponsored that with you. You're not going to give me credit? Yeah.
Yeah. But those are the three.
That's awesome. So moving on, our district is facing huge residential and commercial growth. As a cattle rancher, how would you balance infrastructure and rural land? How have you and how will you?
That's a great question. Well, as an 8th generation Floridian, I can tell you that people have been moving to Florida for a very long time. We have been dealing with population growth and development for more than a century. And it goes through the pattern. People discover a part of Florida, they start moving there. And so people start building more homes. And eventually, as growth happens, congestion happens, people push back on that growth. They go, oh, we don't want any more growth. Now, that doesn't solve the problem, because people continue to move into your area, and they come from other places, and they have resources, and they will bid up the price of existing homes. And they'll do that until your children and grandchildren, the families who live there, their children and grandchildren can't afford to live there anymore. And if you push back on the development too much, your family will break up, because the kids will move to Georgia or Alabama or somewhere where they can afford to live. So what we have to have is a balance between growth and the protection of the beauty that is Florida. And I think we've done that in several ways here in Florida. We want housing, we want affordable housing, and we want to make sure that there's enough of it so our children can find a place to live, hopefully not too far away. But we want to preserve the beauty that is Florida. That's why people move here to start with. It's a great place to live.
Yeah.
And if we preserve green space, if we're preserving our wild areas, we help make sure that our air is clean and our water is pure. And I want my children and grandchildren and generations yet unborn to have that, just like the 8 generations before me. And we do that in several ways in Florida. One way that we do that is through the Florida Wildlife Corridors. What we've done, if you look at a map, you can actually Google this and look at a map, and we have created a Florida Wildlife Corridor. And it connects pristine wilderness areas all the way from the Western Panhandle, all the way through the central spine of Florida, all the way down to the Everglades. And what we're doing is we're preserving what makes Florida beautiful, but we're also protecting our environment by doing this. And that's how we make sure that we have clean air and pure water for future generations. And we have to acquire that land to connect that wildlife corridor. So we do that in a couple of ways. We have the Rural and Family Lands program, and that's a lot of this land is agricultural land. It may be used for a cattle ranch, for example. And the fear is that, well, one day they're going to bulldoze that and build a bunch of homes, and it's going to be lost forever. They always say in Florida, the final crop of a farm is houses. And there's a lot of truth to that. So in the Rural and Family Lands program, what the state does is they'll come in and they'll buy the development rights. And so that family can continue to farm that land, use it for ranching, use it for growing timber, but it's always going to be preserved, and it's never going to be developed. And they'll buy just the development rights. And that's a lot less expensive than buying the land outright. So it accomplishes some great things for taxpayers. We're able to preserve that land for less money than it would cost to buy the land outright. And we're also preserving a beautiful part of Florida for future generations. There are other things that we do too. There are times when, under other programs, we do buy land and we buy it outright. So we do it in several ways. But that's how we achieve balance between growth and protecting what makes Florida beautiful and helps preserve our quality of life.
Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people, especially my generation, are worried about the data centers. What is your stance on the data centers? How do you think, in your position, that what you're able to do and what you want to do?
Well, as a state legislator, first of all, I would say that when it comes to data centers, that is a local issue for local counties, local municipalities, and I think they are best in tune with their constituents and the voters that live in their neighborhoods. And I think that's a decision that, all things being equal, are best made at the local level. I know too that, look, a lot of people are upset about the very idea of data centers, but we also need to think of, well, why do we need those? When if there are people out there that say they want no data centers whatsoever, they'd like to get rid of all of them. Okay, but that means no more text message. That means no more email. That means no more cell phone. That means no more internet, ultimately. That means no more a lot of things that you rely on in this life. So we need to think that through. It also is very important infrastructure now for purposes of national defense and public safety. So, like most things, it requires some thoughtful consideration, input from all the stakeholders, and respect for the local citizens. And we have to land these decisions in a way that strikes the appropriate balance. But all in all, I believe that that is a local issue.
Yeah. So speaking of the local issues, you do talk a lot about our schools and defending them, and you've done a great job when you mention like DEI and the teacher programs and everything. What is your direct relationship with our local school boards?
You know, I've been very interested in our local school board, and for many years. There was a time in Duval County where I felt that the school board was frankly headed in the wrong direction. And I thought they were moving our education system into an ideological direction that was not reflective of the citizens' and parents' values. And I got very involved in that. I was Republican Party chairman at the time, and I got involved in that. And the party had theretofore not really gotten involved in school board races. Back then, they said, well, school board races are nonpartisan, and if they're nonpartisan, we're not involved in that, we're doing other things. But you know, the Democrat Party never had that problem. They always got involved in school board races. They did for decades on end, and we ended up with these really left-wing school boards all across the country, and they started indoctrinating our kids, and somehow or another it became cool to wear a Fidel Castro or Che Guevara shirt to school, but not cool to wear one that said Jesus. And I started looking at that, and one of my predecessors, Karen Morton, she had first made that observation to me, and I thought, you know what? You're right. We should be involved in school board races. The other side doesn't treat them as nonpartisan, neither should we. So I started raising money. I started identifying candidates. I started backing candidates. At that time, there was a liberal majority, 6-1, on the Duval County School Board. And I got involved in those races, and it took election cycle after election cycle. It took a while. But now, that school board has been flipped. And along that journey, it became popular to get involved in these school board races all across the state of Florida and then all across the country. And grassroots groups, parents were organizing. They had had enough, but we were at the forefront of that. We were involved in school boards before school boards were cool. And now, parental choice is respected. We have been working hard at getting this radical ideological materials out of our schools. Look, there were actual pornographic books in public school libraries. I mean, there were things that really needed to be fought over, things that we should have never, ever had to deal with, but we were. And those tables now are turned, but in the upcoming elections, I'm worried, frankly, that the left is going to try to take back lost ground. I'm worried about that, and we need to make sure that we hold on to the gains that we have. We cannot be complacent.
Absolutely. I do know that you are very involved in that, and I think our board has gotten better, and so much better over the years. Like I said, I speak at almost every school board meeting because I think it's very important that we're not letting, because one side's going to fight dirty, and they're going to continue to fight dirty, and I'm glad that we're not stooping down to their level, but what we are doing is we're standing our ground and making sure and saying, that's not right. I'm glad that that's what we're doing. Well,
that's right. And in the upcoming elections, we're going to be voting for school board members. And speaking as a state legislator, I have endorsed Lindsay Denmark for school board and Donovan Bradley.
I've interviewed both of those, by the way. Go watch those episodes.
Yeah. They're fantastic. They'll be highly, highly effective and energetic, and you just couldn't do better. So I am proud to see that there are people carrying that torch.
Me too. I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see our schools continue to grow and people getting involved, because like I said, I can't vote, but you guys can, you can, and I think it's very important that people are getting informed about it. So to move on, you've sponsored prominent bills around biological definitions on state IDs and protecting historic monuments. Why do you find these issues to be central to preserving Florida's future?
Well, as for biological gender on your ID, when the police pull you over, they should know what they're dealing with. And there was a similar bill I ran, and point of fact, it didn't pass, but maybe I should run it again. I ran a bill that was called the What is a Woman Act, whose purpose would have been to define what a woman and what a man is for purposes of Florida law. We used to not be confused about that. And I think that speaks for itself. There have been some really crazy conversations going on in the public arena, and we shouldn't be confused on those things, but here we are. So with regard to the ID, there's that. Then where it comes to monuments, history belongs to all Floridians, and our history is complicated. And generations ago, people thought it important to create a monument, and they didn't create the monument for themselves to look at in that day. They create a monument so that it lasts through time and it speaks to generations that haven't even been born yet. That's why you do that. So this is the way that one generation speaks to the future. And there is this communication that happens over decades, over centuries even, from one ancient generation to a new generation. And I don't think we should shut down that conversation. We may not agree with what a prior generation had to say, but we should learn from our history. You don't shut it down, you learn from it. When you tear down a monument, you're shutting down that conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think what we should instead do is add to our history, not subtract from it. I think it has real value. I think we get to learn. I want people to walk by a monument and a little son or grandson says, "Hey, Grandpa, what is that? Who is that?" And it should spur a conversation. And hopefully that grandpa knows who that is. And they have a conversation about what that person is and what they did and why that statue was built. And if they did right, if they did wrong, if they did some things right and did some things wrong. It becomes a tool to teach the next generation. And And that's okay. Ancient generations can speak to future generations, and it can create those teachable moments, and that's important for our civilization.
I think that's great. Most of Duval went on a field trip to downtown Jacksonville, and we would kind of walk around, go see the different buildings and such. And they had that statue in downtown Jacksonville between all the buildings at the landing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was very interesting. I don't remember how they explained it and the whole history behind it, but it was very, very interesting to hear, oh, this is someone who had an impact. And we get to hear about it today because this is here for the next generation and next generation. We're hearing out on a school trip, we're getting to continue to learn about it. And I think it's very important that that's continuing to happen.
Well, that's right. And the woke left made war on public monuments all across the country. They tore down all sorts of statues. And look, that was an iconoclasm. An iconoclast, once they get started, it never ends. Mm-hmm. You know, they started tearing down one group of statues. The next thing you know, they wanted to tear down statues of Christopher Columbus. I've even heard that they want to tear down statues of Andrew Jackson here in Jacksonville, the namesake of Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And I talk to people on the other side and I go, look, you better think this through, because if history's not safe, then your history's not safe either. Who's to say some future group, maybe it's the hashtag #MeToo group, and they start having riots and they want to tear down statues of Martin Luther King because he wasn't nice to women, they say. Mm-hmm. Would that be right? Of course not. Of course not, because he was a consequential figure.
Absolutely.
And we should learn from historic figures. We should learn what they did good and what they did wrong, mm-hmm. and we should have those conversations, learn from our past, and aspire to do better.
Absolutely. I think party lines is a big thing about that. You look at D.C., and we do have the Martin Luther King Memorial, and no one's calling for that to be torn down. And, you know, he did bad things in his life, but so is every other person who has a statue, and also people who don't have statues. Everybody has wrong in their life.
There aren't any perfect people,
mm-hmm.
and, you know, Jesus was.
I was about to say, we don't have any statues of him, but.
And, well, you can put statues up there, and there are some people that disagree with that, too. Mm. And look, what we have done is we have set a precedent now. We allowed an iconoclasm to occur, and that is within our living memory now. And right now, no one is calling to tear down those statues of Martin Luther King, but you have established that precedent. That's dangerous. We should actually pass legislation to protect public monuments, leave them up. You can contextualize them if you want to. Tell your story. Don't shut down someone else's.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate you doing that. I'm going to move on to our next questions, and then we'll take a break. You serve on the Select Committee on Property Taxes. What's the state's exact plan to reel in the sky-high property taxes?
So I served on that committee, and we proffered a number of ideas. There were half a dozen or more that we proffered over to the Senate. Now, the Senate did not take any of them up. Ultimately, we got a proposal from the governor, and then that was modified. And let me start by saying the property taxes are just too high. Across the state, in the last 6 years or so, property tax revenue has approximately doubled. And I don't think services have doubled. There's been some inflation, sure. And we've had some population growth.
Oh, shoot. Okay, property taxes. I apologize.
It's all right. That's all right. Look, whenever I talk about how property taxes have doubled in 6 years or so, and we haven't doubled services, that's the reaction I get from most people.
That is the reaction.
Yeah, it's a very common reaction. So the fact is property taxes are too high. And look, think about it. If you work hard, You buy a home, you do all the right things, you pay all your payments, yet you still have to pay taxes. And if you don't, they'll file a lien on your house. And if you don't pay them, they'll seize your house. Mm-hmm. And maybe in the latter years of your life, maybe you've retired, you don't make as much money as you used to. Maybe you have health problems. And now you can't afford the things you used to afford, and they can take away your home and sell it at public auction. And there in the golden years of your life, they can make you homeless? Is that a power we want the government to have? How is that right? It turns you from a property owner into a permanent serf. You then are renting your home in perpetuity from the government. That's wrong. And I'd like to see us change that. Now, that isn't going to happen all in one fell swoop. On the ballot is a proposal to increase the homestead exemption to $250,000 on homesteaded property only. And I think it's a good start. It also opens the window under the Florida Constitution for local governments over time to be able to further eliminate property taxes if they choose to do so. It exempts that portion that is allocated by districts for the payment of schools, for the funding of schools. And I think it strikes a reasonable balance. And I think we should vote for it. I think it'll provide meaningful tax relief for average homeowners in Florida. And I think it helps move us down the path toward a vision of real, meaningful tax reform there.
I think as my parents have moved, seeing that process with buying a home and taxes has definitely been something I've looked into, and I appreciate you mentioning that and bringing up the bill that supports that.
That's right, and I'll add this. People say the sky is falling. Oh, if you vote for this, local governments aren't going to be able to stay in business. Look, that's not true. The Florida legislature did not sit down and craft a bill to come up with a way to bankrupt every city and county in Florida. We did not do that. That's what they will say, but that isn't true. And the truth is, look, if you pass this and you change the Florida Constitution, that's the way this has to happen, because Florida, the government of Florida, we get no revenue from ad valorem taxes. And this is all laid out in the Florida Constitution. We can't actually pass a law to reduce property taxes. This is the will of the people. The people have to vote on this to change the Florida Constitution. And if that passes, then the legislature will come back into session, and we will come back into session and we will come up with implementing legislation, and we'll come up with ways to make this work. And so there may be revenue generating ways that right now are denied to local governments that we might give back to them, or we might facilitate other methods of revenue generation that right now have limits on them. Mm-hmm. There are a number of things that we would be able to do to help smooth that out and minimize disruption, and yet accomplish what we think is a worthy public policy, which is to reduce the risk that in your old age you might lose your home because you can't afford to pay property taxes and they're just too darn high.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And I want to switch one last time, and we'll take our break. On the topic of abortion, do you ever think that Florida will see a ban on abortion, and would you support it?
So ever is a long time, and I'm not sure what might ever happen, but yes, I would support it. I'm pro-life, and I oppose abortion. And when we passed the heartbeat bill, we also passed a lot of revenue to help support families. And I think you can do that. I think we can help support new mothers. I think we can help support families and encourage people to have children. The truth is, birth rates have been declining, and that's actually a problem. So I think we should have more children. We should choose life. And I hope one day that Florida fully does. But right now, I'm very happy that we were able to pass, and I supported the heartbeat bill.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll take our break here and we'll be right back. Aloha! Welcome to Jacksonville's only authentic Hawaiian coffee and waffle cafe.
Here at Aloha, we get our coffee beans flown straight from the island of Hawaii. They are flown fresh overnight for your enjoyment here in Jacksonville, Florida. Our batter here at Aloha is handcrafted with our famous family recipe. It took 8 long months to perfect this recipe, and to top off those unique waffles, we get our fruit delivered daily. So whether you're craving a savory, mouth-watering chicken and waffles or a sweet island-inspired dessert, waffle topped with fresh fruit and ice cream, we definitely have you covered. When you dine with us here at Aloha, you can feel good knowing that you're eating real ingredients, you're drinking quality coffee, and you're supporting a local family business right here in Jacksonville, Florida.
To continue, how does your faith in Jesus inform your decision-making in Tallahassee?
Well, before I ran for office, I prayed. And I discussed it with family, and I prayed some more. And I felt very clearly led that that was what God wanted me to do. And that has colored everything that I've done. It's why I ran. It's why I'm there. And I always tell people, look, you don't have to believe this, but you should believe that I believe that I am on a mission from God. And I seek wise advice and counsel. If it's an important issue of the day, I meet with everyone and I listen to what they have to say. And I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to vote. And I'm going to do what I think is right. I always think if I do the right thing, then the people will reelect me. And if they don't, well, then I get my life back. But either way, I'm going there to do the right thing. And I am going to pray because God sent me there. And when I get on a mission, don't get in my way. I'll ask you to move aside, please. But I'm on a mission from God. I'll run over you if I have to. Mm-hmm. And so that's how faith imbues what I do in the legislature.
Do you find prayer and fasting to be essential to your leadership?
I could stand to do a little more fasting, according to my doctor. But prayer is essential. The Bible says we should pray without ceasing, and that means you walk in a spirit of, in a prayerful spirit. Mm-hmm. Given the gravity of the things that we're dealing with in our country and in Florida, if you don't stay in a prayerful place, I'm afraid that you would end up saying things and doing things that you ought not do or say. Mm-hmm. And so I try to stay in that place because we are in such a fraught, polarized, divided environment that it's important. It helps keep me centered.
Absolutely. How do you keep that balance between partisanship and your faith? Like, how are you, because I've always been told going into politics that it'll break you apart and you'll never be able to go into it because you'd never be able to stand by Jesus. How are you able to make that balance, and what advice do you give to those who want to go in politics but still want to have a strong relationship with God?
What a fantastic question. So in politics, every day you are surrounded by people who tell you they're either throwing rocks at you and they tell you how much they hate you, or they're throwing rose petals at your feet and telling you how great you are. Mm-hmm. And either way, you can come away from that thinking it's all about you. And it can't be about you for a Christian.
Absolutely.
It has to be about him and doing the right thing. And so if you're not careful, you'll come to be in a place of self-centeredness rather than being centered on your faith and on God. And that's why I think people warn about that. Mm-hmm. And the way I correct for that is I surround myself with good, godly men who have spiritual discernment, who love me enough to tell me when I am full of myself. And I think you just need to have good advisors. Mm-hmm. And so then that prepares you for the battles of the day. And we have battles that we need to fight. And we are fighting over some things that are very, very contentious. And in certain cases, I think we're fighting against things that are just evil. I'll give you an example. I was helping to lead the debate on a bill to ban transgender surgery for little children. And that day on the floor of the House, the Democrats were basically fighting for the right to castrate little kids, mm-hmm. or cut the breasts off of little girls in the name of gender-affirming health care. And we said that day, that's not health care. What that is an abomination. What that is evil. Mm-hmm. And when confronted with evil, your choice should be pretty clear. You fight evil. And so I wish it weren't the case, but it is. So my faith is important, and it's important for all of us because there are certain things that we're fighting over in this country that are just evil. And I don't want to cast aspersions on my fellow man. I'm not pointing fingers at them as individuals. I point fingers at the behavior. Don't stand there and tell me that it's okay to sexually mutilate an 8-year-old child, because I'm going to fight you over that. Mm-hmm. I am going to fight you to kingdom come over that. And by the way, we passed that bill. We voted on that bill. We banned transgender surgery on little children in Florida. And when we did, there were a whole bunch of transgender people in the gallery. We voted, they announced the vote, they threw their panties at us. And
disgraceful.
It is disgraceful, but it shows exactly what we're fighting about. Mm-hmm. And I think it answers your question. Faith matters, especially now. And I want us to get through these fights. I want us to fight what's evil, promote what's good, and get beyond this finally, so that we can make politics boring again and argue about just basic matters of mundane policy. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do that one day, and then I'm going to retire to my farm and raise cows.
That's awesome. I appreciate you making sure that you have a Jesus-centered outlook. Do you think that there's one verse or one person in the Bible that guides your leadership?
One verse? No, you have
or a good verse. You don't have to pick one in particular.
There's a verse somewhere in many counselors, there's wisdom. And I think it might be that. But really, it needs to be taken as a whole. And here's the thing that we must remember. We live in a fallen world. We are all sinners. None of us are perfect. We're all just trying to get through this life as best we can. And we should not let ourselves be consumed by temporal matters, because that's what politics are. It's all temporal matters. And really, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we should be focused ultimately on eternal matters.
That's right.
So, yes, we're going to argue as a people about matters temporal, but let us try to remember that eternal matters are what really matter.
I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, we have elections coming up soon. There will be a primary soon. And we are going to have pivotal midterm elections. And it is a a very fraught affair. The control of the U.S. Congress and Senate are at issue, and we have races here in Florida that will help determine that outcome. Then we have a special election for a city council seat in Jacksonville. Deborah Wesley is running for that seat. And overall, it's going to be very low voter turnout. They project that we'll have turnout of somewhere between 22 and 23%. So the law of small numbers applies here. We need Republicans to show up to the polls and vote. Mm-hmm. If we don't show up and vote, well, I'll say this. Republicans who don't vote elect Democrats. And the party that is out of power is mad. And that's a good motivator for Democrats to show up and vote. And Republicans can be complacent. And we are not in a position where we can be complacent. Republicans need to show up and they need to vote. And they need to take a friend. And they need to call all of their other friends and make sure they vote too. This is a game in which you must be present to win. Vote by mail, vote early, vote in person, but make sure you vote.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and I appreciate you for coming on.
All right.
All right.
Thank you,
have a good
Myles.
rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.